right, Robby, what's on your radar today?
Well, Brianna, TikTok is in trouble. The House of Representatives approved legislation that would force ByteDance, the popular social media app's Chinese parent company, to sell it to a U.S.-based firm. Now, the vote was 352 to 65. President Biden has indicated he would sign the legislation, so now it's just a matter of whether the Senate chooses to act. The margin of the vote's passage and the bipartisan nature of the legislation might make people think that it's popular. This is certainly the framing that Republican proponents have adopted. Orrin Cass, a former advisor to Senator Mitt Romney and national conservative policy thinker, described libertarians who oppose the ban as badly isolated and hurting their credibility in the conservative coalition. Okay, well, on the other hand, the three most important political and media figures on the right all oppose the legislation. They are, of course, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and former President Donald Trump. Each has railed against the federal government's misguided efforts to police social media. Musk said the bill would result in, quote, censorship and control. Carlson fretted that the feds could use the new authority to take similar action against X. And Trump, who, to be clear, previously supported banning TikTok, is now worried it would hurt him with young people in the 2024 presidential election. Definitely a flip-flop, but at least a directionally correct one, I would argue. Now, the bill was also opposed by some of the most conservative members of the House, as well as the furthest left ones, Representative Thomas Massie, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Ro Khanna, and so on. What this really shows is that the battle over TikTok is not a battle between libertarians and everyone else. On the contrary, it's a battle between various members of the bipartisan Washington, D.C. establishment who see direct government intervention as the answer to every problem, and another group of people, including myself, who recognize that this power is likely to be abused. Now, dubious arguments have been deployed against TikTok in the past. The establishment's logic this time around is that the app's Chinese owners are beholden to the Chinese Communist Party, and thus it poses a national security risk. So let's give this argument maximum credit. It is true the CCP is an authoritarian menace, and the Chinese government absolutely, in my view, has pressured TikTok to censor content about Tiananmen Square, the religious sect Falun Gong, also criticism of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, Americans who get their news primarily from TikTok should, in fact, keep that in mind. But of course, the U.S. government has also pressured American tech companies to censor content on social media. Thanks to the Twitter files, the Facebook files, and other independent investigations, we know that multiple federal agencies, including the FBI, the CDC, the Department of Homeland Security, even the White House itself instructed social media platforms to take down contrarian content relating to elections, Hunter Biden, COVID-19, and other subjects. When President Biden decided the companies had been insufficiently deferential to his pandemic-related dictates, he accused them of killing people and threatened to take action against them. If Congress really wanted to do something about government censorship of content on social media, well, legislators could rein in the feds. They could reduce funding to those agencies that engage in wrongdoing. They could fire wrongdoers. They could craft guidance for bureaucrats in the future, what kind of contact they're allowed to have with social media platforms. But instead, they're singularly focused on TikTok. Now, the legislation passed by the House would apply to any social media company that is designated as a foreign adversary-controlled application. U.S. law currently defines China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran as foreign adversaries. The bill further stipulates that an app is deemed to be controlled by a foreign adversary if it satisfies at least one of the next three criteria. And this is very important. So one, if it is headquartered in one of those countries. Two, if one of those countries owes a 20% stake in it. Or three, if the app is subject to, quote, direction or control by one of the foreign adversaries. Now, I think it's very easy to see how this legislation creates a blueprint for taking future action against social media companies beyond just TikTok. In the wake of the 2016 election, for instance, Democratic lawmakers, mainstream media pundits, and national security advisors all accused Facebook of being complicit in Russia's various schemes to sow election-related discord online. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper said Russia was more responsible for Hillary Clinton's loss than Trump was. The thrust of the argument was that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg had allowed his platform to be compromised by Russian misinformation. Now, it's true that if the TikTok bill were to become law today, the federal government would not likely be able to take direct action against Facebook or X tomorrow. But the language in the bill, direction and control by a foreign adversary, that is exceedingly slippery. It is not difficult to imagine a future where vengeful federal bureaucrats accuse a disfavored app of promoting contrarian foreign policy views and punish it accordingly. We should listen to Senator Rand Paul, who writes on X, "The House ban of TikTok is not securing our nation. It's a disturbing gift of unprecedented authority to President Biden and the surveillance state that threatens the very core of American digital innovation and free expression." So, Brianna, you asked yesterday, you said, take a look at what the actual bill says. So I did so. And, I don't want to exaggerate anything.
Yeah.
This would not allow tomorrow action to be taken against the other companies because it has these criteria. So it's got to be a foreign adversary, which right now is those 4 countries. And then if it's headquartered there, if one of those governments owns a certain 20% stakeholder in it, fine. But the third one is the one that concerns me. 4 is directed or controlled. Well, what is directed by? Again, to believe the mainstream media, they said Facebook was directed by Russia. They've said Elon Musk in his views that the Ukraine war is over and Ukraine should negotiate a surrender, that kind of thing. Is that, how many times do we hear this is Russian propaganda? These are Russian talking points. They freely say this, that these foreign governments are exercising direction or control.
And look at what they said to the TikTok CEO when they were grilling him at Congress. They kept insisting that he was Chinese, almost as though him being Chinese would have made him necessarily, right. As he made very clear, he's like, guys, truly, I'm not Chinese. But as though if he were, that wouldn't mean necessarily that he could be directed by the Chinese government. The implications of that are that if you were just a descendant of the people of any of these 4 countries, that Congress can try to make the case that you are under their control.
And imagine the hypocrisy. How could Joe Biden sign a piece of legislation that tries to stop government direction of the content on social media when he himself, his administration, his White House tried to exercise tremendous control over the content on social media, despite the First Amendment actually prohibiting or giving us some protection from that? Obviously, we're going to work this out in court in the next couple weeks as the Supreme Court considers Missouri v. Biden. But it seems incredibly hypocritical. And we could fix. There's nothing we can do about. Unfortunately, I wish China and Russia and other countries did not try to promote nefarious control schemes on social media companies, but our government is responsible, our representatives are responsible for our government, and they could take steps to reduce the amount of authority our government has over social media apps, but they're not interested in doing that.
Yeah, it's also, sort of rich when our government is in Jamaica right now planning the next leadership of Haiti and paying Kenyan troops to come and install whoever they choose. So, the foreign meddling stuff, what did Trump say? Hey, who doesn't do it? There's a certain kind of honesty, at least in his approach. And here's something interesting to note. I'm not going to attribute this poll that just came out solely to the TikTok ban. Obviously, I think that would be premature. The TikTok ban is new, and these polls tend to be taken over a period of days before they come out or even weeks before they come out. However, there was a new civics poll that came out yesterday of the youth vote, age 18 to 34. Trump is up 12 points over Biden, according to this poll, in the age group 18 to 34.
Trump has some good political instincts.
That's unprecedented. Now, of course, do I believe that he's a good faith actor, having been the one that started the drumbeat for a Twitter ban back in 2020? Sorry, TikTok ban back in 2020? No. Absolutely not. However, reading the wind and understanding that this is deeply unpopular, Joe Biden's on one side of it, along with a bunch of establishment Republicans who've been a thorn in your craw, and you should be on the other side of it. Again, correct. Excellent political instincts. And if I'm a young person, seeing myself and my future getting battered from every direction, feeling betrayed by promises from Joe Biden, and at least Donald Trump is going to pander to me a little bit by saying a TikTok ban is bad. I'm not saying it's a right, informed, good decision, but this is politics, babe. And looking at the tea leaves, it's remarkable that the Democrats would head first into this morass.
Indeed. All right, we will continue to pay attention to this subject, and we will have more Rising right after this.